So we're not getting anything for ground this update. Pakistan, a country known for their diverse nature, cricket, chai, tea, but today we're just gonna focus on their military. Specifically, we're gonna talk about every Pakistani ground vehicle that could be added to War Thunder and how this could be done. Now, why am I covering Pakistan specifically? Because I'm a man of my word. And because Gaijin is already slowly adding Pakistani vehicles and I want to be ahead of the curve. Poland will be next, I promise, I promise. Maybe. Like India, Pakistan was part of the British Empire, up until 1947 when it became independent. After this, there were a handful of wars between Pakistan and India, with most notably the one from 1971, where Pakistan lost, resulting in East Pakistan becoming independent themselves, which we now know as Bangladesh. Now, how to implement Pakistan as a nation into the game? We already have a handful of them in the game actually, in the Chinese tech tree. For ground, this is the Al-Khalid 1 and the T-80UD, as well as some aircraft, all with just Chinese voice lines sadly. The only decal we have for Pakistan, apart from its flag, it's the basic Air Force roundel. When I started researching Pakistan, I already kinda assumed Pakistan would work best as just a subtree for China, but this has since changed a little. Pakistan has a decent number of vehicles, 67 on my list to be precise. For reference, that is 50% more than Israel currently has. I think it could still absolutely work as a subtree, but alternatively you could combine Pakistan with Bangladesh, which has a pretty good military of its own, which I'll cover in a separate video. The forum user Armen Lozone has made an entire ground, air and naval tree for combined Pakistan and Bangladesh tree, and I think this is definitely the way to go. This man's work, although unfinished right now, was certainly a good help when making this video. The man even has drones covered. But I don't believe this is going to happen. As previously said, Gaijin is already adding Pakistani vehicles to China. And there's already a VT5 for Bangladesh in the Chinese tree on the dev server as well. For this project, I also want to credit Pikpikker for his Afghan-Pakistan tech tree, as well as the awesome people in my Discord, who greatly help me research each time, and you can join as well if you want to help me with future projects or just want to hang out. As per usual, we'll first look back at our previous project, this time India, and go over the stuff I missed or got wrong. I know, talking about India and a video about Pakistan, heresy. If you're not interested in this and want to get straight to the Pakistani vehicles, you can skip ahead to here. First of all, I missed another major SAM system, the MR SAM, that can, again, just shoot down whatever. India also has a handful of M47 and M48s, strategically obtained from Pakistan. I'm not sure if India actually used these, however, and how much. I kinda feel indifferent to them. Apart from this, I got the boys anti-tank rifle from the ACV IP's 12mm rifles, when in reality all boys rifles are 14mm. One thing I forgot to mention about the Bishma's last video is the fact that alongside their Stora, they also lose the laser warning receiver, which I didn't realize at the time, but makes sense. I've also been notified that the Bishma 2, the T90MS, just isn't real. There were plans, but due to a particular European military event, this never came to fruition. India will also not domestically produce them in favor for domestic designs. Now, let's go to Pakistan. Pakistan had a handful of American tanks, so we'll get those out of the way first. They had M24 Chaffees, M4A2 and M4A4 Shermans, as well as M4A1 E6 Shermans, which are 75mm M1s upgraded with a 76mm gun and a much improved engine, transmission and suspension. They had M46 B2s, M47s as one of their main tanks for a while. These were upgraded domestically with the engine of the M60 and they removed the bow gun and gunner. They had M48s and a handful of Lend-Leased M60 A3s, and they trialed the M1 Abrams. The only other Western MBT Pakistan had were specialized AMX-30s, called the AMX-30S. They were slower than the base AMX-30, but got a laser rangefinder in return. Pakistani crews didn't like them very much. For the rest, it's all Eastern or domestic vehicles. Pakistan had post-war T-34-85s, Type 63s and Type 59s. There are pictures of Type 59s with a British L7 105mm gun, but very little is known about them, apart from they're there. Pakistan was also offered a version of the Type 59 but with the gun from the AMX-30 by France. But yeah, never adopted. Pakistan did use Type 69-2s, as well as the Type 85-2 AP. The Type 85 is a Chinese tank that is not yet in the game. It was only ever used by Pakistan outside of China, but it's not all that special, basically being a downgraded CTC-96. You get a 125mm gun, smoke grenades, laser rangefinder, and that's about it. These were upgraded by Pakistan to the Type 85 UG, getting a new fire control system now with thermals. Okay, the next part is gonna be a bit confusing, bear with me. We're gonna talk about the Al-Zarrar, but there are like 8 different versions, and they're all just named Al-Zarrar. Armen's work here was again very helpful, and I'll try to explain this as accurately as I can. The Al-Zarrar was a heavy modernization of the Type 59s, getting a new 125mm gun with a semi-automatic loader, which did not replace the loader crewman, a new fire control system with a laser rangefinder, laser warning receiver, and Gen 2 thermals, as well as a new engine. The prototype of this also has these metal plates all over it, but they look very thin for ERA, so I'm not sure if this is actually ERA or just metal plates to simulate the weight of ERA. There's a slight alternate version of this prototype with slightly sharper angles. The production version of the Al-Zarrar gets no ERA and instead gets this steel shell around the turret. This is not composite as seen by this picture, and is instead just to make placing ERA easier, which is fair, because I mean, this looks like ass. Later versions actually get the ERA pretty much all over the front of the vehicle, though rarely on the side. There's a newer prototype with a new welded turret, as well as a double weapon system on the roof with a huge gun shield. I don't know what weapons these are exactly. From the looks of it, it could be a double 30mm grenade launcher, like a lot of the North Korean tanks have. Check out my video on those. There's this other prototype Al-Zarrar, which looks very similar to the CTC-96, but it is certainly just a Type 59 under there. This thing could have composite armor under there, but there's no way to tell. Pakistan is apparently also working on a future version of the Al-Zarrar, somehow looking even more like the CTC-96. With all that out of the way, let's go over the far less confusing Al-Khalid. The Al-Khalid is heavily based on the Chinese Type 90, very creative there, also known as the MBT-2000. The first version is already in game. Yes, they call this the Al-Khalid 1, but it's just the base Al-Khalid. The Al-Khalid 1 has a new, faster autoloader, an upgraded engine, a new fire control system, and Generation 3 thermals. And the in-game Al-Khalid has none of this. The Al-Khalid was also tested with the Ukrainian Varda ABS system, which was like the Stora, but Ukrainian. The system was not considered important enough, however, and was never adopted. Right now, Pakistan uses VT4s from China. They're exactly the same as the VT4A1 in the game, just without the ABS system. Pakistan is upgrading these, however, to the Haider, getting a better fire control system as well as other minor improvements. The other Pakistani tank we already have in game is, of course, the Object 478BE, which is a very weird way to spell unmodified T-80U event vehicle. There's also a version of the T-80UD with a slightly stronger engine. Pakistan tested more Ukrainian vehicles, this being the T-84 Oplot M. A T-80 heavily upgraded by Ukraine, getting a new 3-layered ERA, the Varda system again, a laser rangefinder, laser warning receiver, insane thermals, and a new engine. Like I said, it was trialed by Pakistan but never adopted in favor of the VT4. Ukraine tried again by modifying their T-84 specifically for Pakistan with the T-84 Oplot P, getting a slightly different armor layout and lighter ERA, but again it was rejected by Pakistan. Pakistan has a handful of light vehicles. This list will not be very long, but the previously mentioned M24 and Type 63 could be placed in this line as well. Starting with the Hummer, the armored car I've mentioned a couple times before. This is the Mark I, armed with a 15mm Besa heavy machine gun. And the Mark IV has a more traditional American-made 37mm. The Al-Hamza is a M113 with a 25mm. And this turret you might recognize from the ZSL-92, though it loses the smoke grenades. The Hamza IFV is a domestic 6x6 APC armed with a 25mm, I believe? I'm not entirely sure, could be something else. Lastly is Pakistan's one and only infantry fighting vehicle, the Viper. It's not in service. It's based on a modified AB-113 though, getting a new engine and bolt-on armor and spotlighters. And is armed with the Slovakian Tura 30 remote-controlled turret. This thing gets a 30mm Bushmaster, 2 Spike HGMs, smoke, laser rangefinder, and good thermals. In the tank destroyer section there's a bit more, starting with the Sexton and M7 Priest again. Kaijin, please. The Sexton is British, based on the M4 chassis armed with a 25 pounder. And the M7 is American, based on the legs of the M3 Lee, armed with a 105mm howitzer and a 50 cal. Another vehicle that's based on the M3 Lee is the M3 Lancer. This is an M3 Lee with its turret ripped off, the hull gun replaced with a 17 pounder, and it's fake. This is not real, it's a dummy gun. No 17 pounder was ever fitted to an M3 Lee. Cone has a more detailed video about this if you're interested. What is real is the Chevrolet WB, a British truck with a 40mm 2-pounder duct tape to it, as well as a 7.62mm machine gun for the guy sitting next to the driver. This thing looks very goofy and I really hope we get this thing someday. The Badhaye is a prototype on a M113A1, with two M40 106mm recoilless rifles and a laser rangefinder, which is kinda crazy. The Cheetah is a armored, militarized 4x2 tractor, and I think these are exactly the types of new vehicles we need in game. This particular one is the AT version, armed with a tow ATGM. Pakistan also had just M113s, armed with tows and a Dishka. They also have Land Rover Defenders 110s, armed with a Bakhtar Shigan ATGM. The Bakhtar Shigan are domestically produced Chinese HG-8 missiles. The closest thing we have currently in game are HG-9 missiles seen on the AFT-09. These same missiles were also mounted on a domestically redesigned M113, called the M113 Talha, and this vehicle is called the Maz. Next to the ATGM, it also gets a 12.7mm Dishka. Pakistan uses M901s as well as M109s. The A2 variant, as well as the A5, which gets a new gun housing for more and faster traversal, and they have M109Ls, an Italian modification with a longer gun for higher velocity. Next up is a vehicle I desperately need, the M110. We are getting more and more howitzer vehicles now, so there's a chance. This is a 203mm gun, if you were wondering. The SH-15 is Pakistan's most modern artillery, a Chinese 6x6 with a 155mm gun. For rocket artillery, Pakistan has the KRL-122, based on the North Korean BM-11 MLRS, and is armed with 30 122mm rockets. The KRL-122 Gazap is the same system, but on a modern truck bed. Last but not least, the SPAA, with more tractors. The Cheetah MG carrier is the same Cheetah tractor from before, now armed with a 14.5mm KPV. Pakistan uses M19s and M42s as well as more tractors. This time armed with ANZA surface-to-air missiles. ANZA missiles are based on the Chinese HN5 Madbats, which are infrared fire and forget missiles, and are very similar to the ones from the PGZ-04A in the game. The Cheetah tractor was apparently also armed with Swedish Bofors RBS-70 SAMs, which we also already have in game. However, there are no pictures of this, so take this with a small grain of salt. The same exact missiles were also used on the Moose anti-air though. The Moose is again mounted on the M113P Talha like the Maz. There was another prototype based on the M113, now armed with 4 ANZA SAMs and 2 14.5mm KPVs, so a great all-round AA. The HQ-7 is another Chinese vehicle, a 6x6 APC, armed with a reverse-engineered French R440 Crowtail SAMs. The HQ-7B is a modernized version of this. It's modernized, I guess. And lastly, we have the HQ-16 and HQ-9. More Chinese SAMs, and I think these kind of speak for themselves, and I want them. It is more than likely Pakistan will be added to China, and that's fine. It makes sense. I mean, there are a lot of Chinese vehicles in here, but still, its own tech tree together with Bangladesh would have been preferable, I think. If you think I missed anything or got something wrong, please let me know in the comments, or better yet, in my Discord. Any corrections will be mentioned next episode, where I'll finally cover Poland. Now subscribe.